This is one of my favorite books of all time by one of my favorite authors of all time. It was the first piece I read by him, Haruki Murakami. This is Norwegian Wood. And I even wrote a paper on this because we were tasked with writing a piece, an essay, on some kind of piece of literature for an author we learned about in class. And I was a big poetry fan at the time, so I went up onto Google and I looked up the names of all the authors that we read about during class, and we read their pieces. And I found some pieces and I was like, wow, this is really good. I can see myself writing a paper on this. And I read Murakami, and there was an excerpt from his first chapter. And at the time, I wasn't really big into reading books, but I read the first chapter, and it was very descriptive. I felt like I was in the moment. For example, once the plane was on the ground, soft music began to flow from the ceiling speakers, a sweet orchestral cover version of the Beatles' Norwegian Wood. The melody never failed to send a shudder through me, but this time it hit me harder than ever. First and foremost, you really do feel like you're in the plane, and now you have this music, this sensory connection in your brain that connects you to the scene that's being played out in this novel. And another thing he does really well there is build suspense. Oh, it always sends a shudder through you? Why does this particular song send a shudder through you? And additionally, that's the name of the book. So now you have some intrigue, you have some curiosity, and you want to solve it. And by the end of the excerpt, which I did not plan on reading, but it hooked me, it was just a beautiful ending of this excerpt, which is the beginning of the story. And so here's a guy who's never read books before this. This really was the transformation on why I read today. Not that I'm the most avid reader, but anytime I do read something, look, I even have it in Polish. I've been reading in Polish to practice my Polish, because I really like this book and this author. And I read through the whole book. I spent like 4 hours in a row for like 4 days, something like that, just in the library, overseeing the window of my community college at the time. And, because I was also not in love at the time, but I was infatuated with this girl who I was very close with. And we were very close with each other. And so that kind of inspired me. And that's why a lot of this book really hit differently, because the guy at the time, he's 19, he's 20. I read this when I was 18. It just makes sense that art has a more profound impact on us when we're young, because we've never tasted the true royalties of life. We've just been engulfed with natural human pace, walking down the street, and then you get something that's beautiful and it's shared to you, it's transmitted to you through symbols that we have standardized through language. And this guy is Japanese, so of course it was translated. But in this video, I want to talk about that research paper that I wrote. Not a research paper, just a paper that I wrote on this book, because it had a profound impact on me. And it was the first time I actually sat down and read through a whole book, obviously not in one day, but one that I actually enjoyed. Not for school, where you're like, okay, let me read this because I have to. I'm a scholar. I'm not a scholar. I just can't get a bad grade, right? When I was younger, I would keep up my grades just so I didn't have a bad grade. Not to be the best, not to have the highest grade, because I loved what I was doing. And this kind of changed that, because I realized that there's something else to it. If I wasn't assigned to read an author, I would still have read this. And that's true, because I could have read 5 poems and wrote about that. But instead, I read this whole thing. And most people, they didn't put that much work in the project. I did it simply because I love this book, and the complexities of it. And there are these characters. They go through what I've attributed as a 3-stage process: life, death, and rebirth. And that is the process of the formation, the questioning, and the resurgence of their personalities or their identities. And that's a fundamental, ambiguous concept or sense of self when we're so young, when we're going through this critical period where we're nearing the end of our brain development, but we're out in the world for the first time. So now the brain's kind of trying to catch up, trying to take all of these moving parts and stuff it into itself to make it permanent before it's done growing. And then we learn at that pace in the future. So it really has to rationalize all these things. And a lot of the time, the emotion is just all over the place. Our hormones are all over the place, not because we're going through puberty, but because we're experiencing things that never happened. And a tragic and really impactful thing that can happen to us is actual death, death of someone we know. And it really makes us question, because when we are, we are. When we're living, we are. Right? We're living, we're experiencing, we simply are. But when we die, now we are not. So that's just fundamentally challenging exactly what we question. So if we're not, what that means is that we have no idea what we're not. And then that also questions, okay, if we don't know what we're not when we're not, then what are we when we are? And so it brings up all of these questions. And then death of someone that you love or someone close to you, it really puts you into perspective, right? Because first and foremost, you're longing for this person again. And you're wondering where they went. Your body's trying to understand it. Your brain doesn't, it can't get through to you. And then after you're healing some bit, not that you can totally heal, but just substitute it essentially, and then build a path in another direction, just go around the obstacle or the excavation in your forest of life. But now you're putting yourself in the shoes of the person has died. It's only natural for us to do it and say, what happens to my consciousness when I die? And so that is death. Life is the first step, and it's just this natural curiosity. I don't know, because natural curiosity, that term, or when I use that term, I feel like people use that when they describe things that they like, they're interested by, they're intrigued by. But there's also a conscious effort to go on that natural curiosity, to follow it. Whereas when we're young, there's no thinking about it. It's just done. If you see a toy in the sandbox, you walk over to it and you start playing with it. You see a fox on the outskirts by the forest, you're like, oh, that's so cool, let me walk over. Most people won't. I probably would walk over to the fox. The fox would just run away. But there's no conscious thought to that. And when we get older, now there's conscious thoughts for most of the things that we do. Even if I go to get coffee, preluding my ritual of getting coffee, I was thinking about getting ready for coffee. One, because it's got me hooked, right? It's like a legal drug technically. And so my body is anticipating that, so that the neurotransmitters in my brain will be prevented from making me feel tired in that sense. But if you're a kid, parents like, oh, let's go get ice cream. And now you're in the car, you're on the way there. So that's life. And when we go through the third process, which is rebirth, following the death, we are trying to draw on the chalkboard once more after we've wiped it off. And if you know a thing about chalkboards, if you were in elementary class or high school or university, wherever, if you were in an educational setting and your professor used a chalkboard and cleaned it off, you know that the erasers suck. There's so much residue that's stained from previous typographies and lessons. And so when you rebuild on that chalkboard, the other lesson will still be there. So if someone that's close to us dies, they stay with us forever, right? We're assuming that you can't go to the bathroom and get a wet paper towel and wipe it off, rinse it off, because then it would clean. No, we're stuck in a room. Our sense of being, our consciousness, our experience on this world is stuck in a simple room. And there's one chalkboard on the room. There's one stick, piece of chalk in the room, and there's one eraser. And sometimes the chalk, it even breaks. And when we run out, there's nothing more for us to do but to donate our chalkboard to another room so someone can learn off it, or to a museum. And that's why I thought this book was very powerful, because this was the subconscious wiring of the characters in this book, who had complex personalities, sometimes extreme, but it took you to a place where you've never been. And even if you never faced tragedy, I've been pretty fortunate. I haven't faced anything very traumatic in my life. I'm a very privileged individual, to which I'm very grateful for my parents, my family, my friends especially, YouTube as well. It's funny because it's a social media platform, but I just am very grateful for it. One of the things that I like about the internet is YouTube, for sure, as long as you use it correctly, or sometimes it can get a little too in your life. It should be a supplement, something on the side. But yeah, having said that, it just really just takes out the few traumatic things that have happened to you, the few tragedies of your life. It really takes you back there into the moment or the person you were when you experienced them, and challenges you to question, to ponder about what happened. And now you can recognize, you can feel the emotions that were covered in the moment, that you were too focused on rationalizing it, that you didn't feel what was going on in your brain. And your body, it kept it in the storage bank. It kept it in a time capsule, in a closet of its biggest room, small closet. When you read this book, you go into that room. You take the key, you unlock the closet. You have to take another key, unlock the box. And you open it, and the light is shining on you. It's bouncing off your face, just like in a cartoon or any movie, or any movie. And there's just this glowing orb, it's an aura, and it shoots out, and it goes through you and into your soul. And now you're experiencing what was meant to be experienced at the time. And you have to come to some reconciliation with that, what it is, what has happened. And following that is where you build a stronger, I hope, thinking optimistically, is where you build a stronger rebirth. You're reborn. And reborn happens on micro levels. Every moment we're experiencing microcosms of this 3-stage process. Simply, even our cells, boom, I just killed 1,000 cells, right? And now they have to go to rebirth, which is probably a lengthy process for them. I'm not quite sure. But even when somebody says something to us we don't take it the right way, or not that we don't take it the right way, but they don't say it the right way. They say something that's rude, even if they don't intend to, and there's some death, and you have to go through some rebirth. That's why the death is so uncomfortable. So I invite you to, if you're one of the 2 viewers that watch this video, not that anybody would have made it this far, maybe in a few years, to let me know if you read this book, and let me know what you think about my theory. And let me know, based on my description, if you have any book recommendations for me, because I think there's a beautiful thing. We group things into nonfiction and fiction. And if you've never read something before, you think that nonfiction is, right, in school, nonfiction, non-fake, whatever. Nonfiction is the only thing that can provide you value. But I argue that fiction has more value in it than nonfiction, because this is being presented. This is this, that is that. You can take it in, and you have a choice if you want to internalize it or not. It's a tip. It's one of those things. It's a tip. It's a trick. So somebody asks you something for a piece of advice or recommendations on how to do something, you can just put it out there. Oh, when you're doing the balance sheet, make sure that assets equals liabilities plus stockholders' equity. That's something that is a fact. But when you read nonfiction, it's more powerful because you're in the moment. You actually experience emotions that the characters are sharing with you. I don't know how to explain it, but it can change your sense of consciousness. It can push you through experiences you've never been pushed through. And you internalize these stories so that when, not when you're asked about something, but when you go through life, when you meet new people, these stories impact how you act with others, how you view yourself, your compassion, your outlook on community and togetherness. Okay, my mic is on. And so, let me know. Let's chat. Peace.